Hey guys, welcome to Flight Test. Today we're going to be working on the Yak-55 wings. And we're going to be building them and installing the electronics. I have all the pieces laid out here for the wing assembly and electronics for inside the wing. So we have our side force generators out, our 2 wing panels, and our set of 3 spars, our 2 20-gram servos, a Y harness, and 2 servo extensions. So now we have all the panels and everything laid out and we know what they are and what they're for. We're going to put everything to the side and we're going to pull out our spars. I have my left wing spar, my right wing spar, and my center spar, and the 2 wood reinforcements. So we have our 3 wing spars laid out, and I'm gonna get ready to weed them out. So we're gonna take our razor blade, run it down the lines, and pull out the foam. All right, now that we have all of our spars weeded out, go ahead and take your time and pause the video here and make sure they look exactly like mine. So I'm gonna go ahead and put my center spar and my left spar to the side and work on my right one. So this is gonna be a B-fold, so we're gonna actually do a test fit, make sure everything folds correctly and there's no foam stuck in there that we didn't see, and then we're gonna go ahead and glue it up. And this is where you're gonna go ahead and make sure it's true and 90 and you're not like squishing it in or it's not too wide. And as you're gluing this down, you might have some squeeze out the side, so make sure you're just wiggling it every once in a while to make sure it doesn't glue to the table. Now we're gonna go ahead and repeat that step on the other side. Now that we have our 1 wing spar done, we're gonna go ahead and repeat the step on the other 2. Whoop. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. All right, now that we have our 3 spars all folded up and ready to go, we're actually gonna put our wood reinforcements into the center one. And the center one is the one without the servo inserts. So now we have our center spar in front of us with our 2 wood reinforcements. We're gonna test fit them and make sure we don't have any glue globs that we need to cut down or remove. So they're gonna place on the inside lip, on top of the foam, just right in the little corner. And now that we know both of them fit, let's get some glue. And the way we're gonna glue these in, we're just gonna take a bead of glue and run it right down the center of the inside platform. And when you're putting these in, don't be afraid to wiggle them around a little bit to get them nice and smeared and strong. Make sure you add the pressure that you need so you can lay it on the table and push down. Just make sure it does not slide on the outside edge at all. Now that we got the first one done, let's repeat that on the other side. So now I have both our wood reinforcements glued in our center spar. We can set this aside. So now we have everything ready to go for for our wing panels. So we're gonna make sure our table is nice and smooth with no glue globs stuck to them. So when we push our wings down, it does not dent or crease them. So the first step for this is gonna be, we're gonna crack the wing in half, and then we're gonna double bevel on the center score line. Our next step is going to be is running a barbecue skewer through the other score lines and then do a test fold on the wing. And you don't need to push too hard during this process, just run it nice and smooth. And now when we're doing our test fold, since we do not have the spar in there yet, we don't want to push it all the way down to the table because that might crack the front leading edge. Boop. Let's do it again. Okay. Now that we're done with the bottom side, I'm going to test fold the top side as well to make sure they're both creased equally. Now that we're done with all of our bevels and scores, we're going to go ahead and glue our spar in. But before we do that, we got to realize we don't want to put too much glue in here so it doesn't leak into these score lines and lock the wing flat. One step to make sure you don't forget is you got to make sure your spar is lined up in the correct orientation. So make sure your servo holes are lined up and your wingtip is also lined up with the end of the spar. And before we add glue to this, we're going to cut out our servo holes. So as we're cutting out the servo hole on the spar, we gotta make sure to be careful on these edges. We might have added too much glue and glued the edges of the servo hole to the side of the spar. So we're gonna go ahead and do that test fit that I was talking about, make sure everything lines up nice and pretty. And then we're going to go ahead and add glue. So as we're setting it down and pushing down to make sure everything's nice and true, we're going to make sure no glue squeezes out the sides and gets pushed into our score lines. So now we have our wing spar glued into our wing. We're going to go ahead and start the next process, which gets kind of tricky because it is asymmetrical airfoil, so we can't just fold it all over in one big swoop and glue everything. So the first step we're going to do is obviously do a test fit. As we're doing our test fit, we're going to make sure our spar lines up with the score lines on the top of the wing as well, and make sure everything sits nice and flat. And another thing to pay attention to is our spar doesn't go the whole way to the inside of the wing, and that's where our center spar will come in. So when we're pushing down on the wing, make sure don't put a lot of pressure here because you will bend the wing. The first step we're going to do here is add some glue to the one right next to the spar and the parallel one on the other side. And you don't want to pump it full of glue because more glue does not mean more strength. And just like on the test fold, we're going to make sure everything lines up nice and pretty, where our spar lines up with those top score lines. And I'll reiterate this again, do not push right here on the wing because that will crease it because your spar does not go the full length. So as we're laying this down with the glue drying, we're just going to add a little bit of balancing every once in a while so that glue does not glue to the spar. So the next step I want to do is go ahead on just this line closest to the aileron. We're going to add some glue in there and fold it over again. And the same as before, as we're putting this down, Just add a little balance every once in a while. We're gonna have the trailing edge off so we do not bend or crease anything. Another thing to check as we're gluing this down is making sure our top and bottom wing skins are parallel to the table. All right, so now we have that step done. Our next step is gonna be doing the same thing to this back side, but with the top side down. And we're gonna go ahead and test run this. So as we're gluing this down, or getting ready to, and are doing a test fit, we're gonna wanna make sure that our trailing edge of the bottom part of our wing touches down right next to the aileron. And if it passes up your aileron a little bit, just take your hand and pull back on that until you can get that bevel of the aileron peeking out. Now for this step, we're actually gonna glue everything else. So we're gonna run our glue here, on top of the spar, on both sides, in this back portion. And like I said before, check and make sure everything's lining up how you want it to. And if your aileron's touching down a little bit, you might have to hold it up as you're letting it dry. And make sure the top and bottom of your wing skin is parallel to the table yet again. Now that we've been sitting here and letting that dry for a minute, we're gonna let go and make sure nothing pops apart. Cool. Our final step for this wing half is gonna be putting a bead of glue between our bottom and top wing panel the whole way across. We're gonna do the same thing as before, but this time we can leave the wing down here. So when we're pushing down, we can make sure we favor where we need to make sure that line is parallel with the aileron. And this is a good time to make sure your wing is starting to look symmetrical and good. And if not, you can try to favor that with this last step. Just as we did last time with our test fit, we're gonna make sure we do not go over that aileron line, and we're gonna make sure we're starting to look symmetrical and parallel to that aileron. Now we're done with our left wing panel and it's looking good. We're gonna put it off to the side and get our right one. Okay. So we're gonna go ahead and do our double bevel. And once we're done with our bevel, if we do see any imperfections like high spots, or if you do cut through the paper, we can fix those things. So if you have a high spot and you don't want to run your blade back over it because you don't want to have a chance of punching through, you can take some sandpaper and sand it down. And then if you do cut all the way through, you can add some tape before you fold the wing over, and that'll make sure it's nice and sealed and tight. Because I do that a lot. I don't have the Bixler bevel. Our next step after we finish that bevel is running our barbecue skewer through the other score lines. Do not do the aileron. I'm gonna go ahead and line this bar, make sure everything looks good and true before we glue it. Everything's looking good, let's add some glue. And double check as you're doing this that your spar is going straight and there's no glue going into those score lines. All right, we're gonna go ahead and do our test fold real quick. And we're gonna push down and make sure everything lines up all nice and true with our spar and our score lines on our top wing panel. And we're gonna go ahead and repeat the steps that we did on the left wing panel. Just add some glue into these two score lines, go ahead and fold our wing over, and as we're rolling it over, We don't want to push down and hold it there steady because we do not want the top panel to glue to the spar. And always have glue sticks at the ready. And as you're doing these steps and you're test folding them, it might be easier for you to have the top side down or the bottom side down. That might be person to person. So whatever way is easier for you, just make sure the spars are lined up with those score lines. And if we unfold it too early and our glue is still tacky, we're gonna wanna refold that over so make sure we hold that correct angle. Wait till the glue is 100% dry. Our next step is running glue along the score line closest to the aileron and then folding it over and repeating the same step that we did last time. And again, make sure your aileron's off the edge of the table so you're not pushing that down, increasing it. Now that that step's done, what I'm gonna do is put glue along the main leading edge on top of both sides of the spar and the trailing edge score line. She don't want to lay down. Here we go. As we fold this over, we're going to make sure that line is good and true. So we're going to pull back a little bit and make sure we're not crossing over top of that aileron line. And hold and wait for it to dry. And as you're waiting for the glue to dry, make sure you're always checking your surroundings. We're good. Now that that's dry, we're gonna go ahead and move on to our final step by putting glue in between the top and bottom wing panel. And as we're holding this down to dry, we're gonna make sure that everything lines up good and parallel with that aileron score line. So now that glue's dry, we're done with this wing panel as well. All right, now that we have our left wing panel and right wing panel done, we're gonna go ahead and remove our center spar and let's get started on these servos. We're gonna start by removing the servos from the box and getting them set up and centered. And with the 17-gram servos, the servo arms that come in the kit are not just quite long enough for the extreme 3D that I wanna do. So I'm gonna have these little wood reinforcements that make my servo arms longer. So the servo arms that come with the 20-gram servos are just a little bit funky. So we have like a plus shape, a star shape, and a circle. So I'm gonna go ahead and take the one that looks like a plus, and I'm gonna cut 3 of the arms off and just leave 1 remaining. And the way these extension arms work, you just take them, slide them over the bottom of the control horn, snap them on, and you're gonna take 2 screws. And the screws we're gonna be using are mounting screws from 9-gram servos, if you have any remaining or laying around. And what I like to do when I'm screwing these on is I put 1 in from the top and I'll put 1 in from the bottom. Now that's nice and good on there. We're gonna go ahead and center our servo and put this on. So with the longer arm we just put on, it's gonna give us actually more control and more deflection on our control surfaces. Now we have this servo center, we're gonna do the same thing to the other one. And as we're getting ready to center up our servos, we want to make sure we have one going each direction. So one's going that way, we want one going this way. Now we have our servos centered up and our extensions on the control horns. We're going to go ahead and pop them in the wings. So the first thing we're going to do is grab one of our wing panels and go ahead and cut the bevel for your aileron. You just take it to the edge of the table, crack it down, and if you have some glue from that back trailing edge, you gotta cut down that score line to make sure there's no glue holding that together so you don't crease or bend it in somewhere you don't want to. We're going to go ahead and make our bevel on the actual control surface itself. Our next step, what we're going to do is we're going to run some glue down the hinge line to reinforce it so we do not have delamination issues in the future. So make sure you have a scrap piece of foam at the ready, so when you run your bead down, you can rub most of that off so it does not glue your hinges shut. And don't be afraid to do a few passes so you get that extra glue smeared in there and all nice and even. Go ahead and wiggle that hinge back and forth to spread that glue around a little bit more and make sure it does not lock your aileron in one place. Now we have our bevel created and reinforced with that glue hinge. We're going to go ahead and grab one of our servos and slide it in here. Since we have two servos here with the control horns facing in opposite directions, we're going to pick the servo that has the control horn closest and facing where we're going to put our other control horn for our control surface. Before we put the servo inside the wing, we're going to want to add our extension on, so in later steps it's easier to plug our servo wire into our receiver. We don't want this plug popping out later, so I'm going to take a little bit of glue, squirt it on here, and push it in. Another way we can make sure this doesn't come unplugged is we can take a piece of tape and put it around the side that we plugged in. And you want to make sure you put it on the side that you plugged in and not the other side that is part of the extension. So I'm going to go ahead and take the end that goes in the receiver and slide that through the hole first. And since our spar does not go the whole way, it might start wandering around in the wing, but you can just take it, lift it up, and give it a little bit of a shake. Slide it on through. I'm going to go ahead and snap that in where it needs to be set, but not glue it just yet until we got our control horn and our push rod all set up. I'm going to go ahead and take our push rod wire and open up the hole just a little bit more so we can get the control horn in there nice and easy. So what you want to do is when you get your control horn in, is make sure the hinge is lined up with the holes for the control horn. So I'm going to go ahead and take one side of this push rod and go ahead and bend it up into a Z-bend. So when we're setting up our push rods on the servo itself, the farther out you go, the more throw you have, and the inner you go, the less throw you have. And it's the opposite for on the control surface itself. The farther down you go, the more throw you have, and the farther up you go, the less throw you have. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our push rod wire and line it up with the hole we wanna use, and just twist it till it pops through. There it goes, all right. So now that we got that punched through, we're gonna hook our servo tester back up and make sure it stays centered through as we're setting up our control surface. So we can go ahead and make sure this is all flat and nice. And we're gonna line it up with the hole we're gonna be using, make a mark there, and then bend another Z-bend so it fits up true. Boop. And as we're getting ready to bend this, we're gonna make sure we bend it the right direction. Because if I bend it straight down, that's not gonna line up right because my control horn's next to it. Make sure I'm as close to 90 as possible. Go ahead and make my first bend. Then my second bend. Straighten it out. Okay. Now we know that lines up, we can go ahead and snip it off. And slide it through the hole we're going to use on the control surface. Right, and another way, if you don't want to just twist the push rod forever, you can take a razor blade, stick it in the hole you want to use, just twist back and forth a few times on this side, a few times on this side, and that'll make the process go a lot faster. And once we see that everything fits good and our push rod length is correct, we can go ahead and glue in our servo and our control horn. But I'm gonna leave everything still connected so I can work with it, and maybe if I need it a little shorter, move it a little bit. If I need a little longer, pull a little bit back. And as you're gluing your servo in, make sure you push down on it, but not too hard. Just make sure it's nice and flat and level. Now that our servo's all glued in, let's glue in our control horn. And if your push rod is a little bit too long, that's no big deal. We can take our pair of pliers and just add a little bit of a bend into that push rod, and that'll shorten the length up. And once the glue is dry, you can go ahead and test out the servo tester. Now that we're happy with how that's moving and it looks good and everything's centered and straight, let's move on to our next wing. And the first step we're going to start with, just like the last wing, is creating our bevel and reinforcing it with glue. And a side note, while you're working on these wings, be careful of these little end pieces because they do bend and break off. Go ahead and wiggle that around, make sure it doesn't stick in one place. Okay. Go ahead and create our Z-bend on the remaining part of our wires. Grab my servo and repeat the same thing I did last time. I'm going to go ahead and pass the servo wire through the side of the wing so I can lay my servo in to test fit my control horn. I'll repeat the same steps as last time, so go ahead and slide that through. Now that we have our servo on our wing, our servo tests are connected to our servo, and our control horn in, let's mark the push rod where we need to bend it and get that going. And as you're bending this, since they are on opposite planes, one's horizontal and one's vertical, you're gonna make sure you don't wanna bend them the same direction. Since this one's already bent, it's facing this way, you're gonna bend this one at 90 degrees perpendicular to that. Go ahead and line this up, make sure everything looks good. I'm liking how that's looking, so I'm gonna go ahead and cut it and slide it on in. Test for everything one last time to make sure you're absolutely happy with everything and how it's sitting. Then go ahead and add some glue. Make sure it's sitting flat and level as it's drying so you don't have any crooked tendencies. And anytime you glue something, make sure it's sitting exactly how you want it. Go ahead and let everything dry for a moment. Then once it's all dry and cured up, let's go ahead and test it out and make sure it's moving how we like it. Now we got everything built for the wings and we got the electronics in. That's it for this episode, and next episode will be about building the fuselage for the Yak-55. Hope to see you guys there.